Hi everyone, my name is Victor and I'm one of the authors of Technique.com. Today we're going to continue with our RHCSA 8 course and we're going to look at how to configure your local repository on Red Hat 8 system. Alright, in our previous lesson, we talked about software installation in Linux part 1 and we looked at what a repository is and what the package manager is. We also looked at what dependencies are, all right? So, and at the end of the class, I said that in the next class, we're going to look at how to use the DNF package manager and the YUM package manager, all right? And this is actually the class I was supposed to go to now, which is software installation in Linux part 2, where we're going to talk about how to use the YUM package manager and DNF package manager. So, for example, now to use the DNF package manager or the YUM package manager to install a software in Linux, you're going to use the command. Let me just pull up the system so I can show it to you. So, you're going to use the command, for example, YUM install or DNF install, whichever one. YUM install, let's say GIT package, and you see that the system is going to go to pull up the package and it's asking if this is okay, yes or no. If I press yes, it goes along to install the package. So, for example, too, I can also use the DNF package manager to install GIT. This is a Red Hat 8 system, all right? DNF install GIT, and it goes along to ask me if I want to. If I say yes, it's going to install the package. You see that it's preparing and it's installing the package, all right? And let's wait for it. So you can see that the package has been installed. But if you've been following my course since from the beginning, your system might not be able to do this actually. So you need to subscribe your system before you can do this, right? So I already have a subscription that I am using, but it's unfortunate I can't share my password and my username. All right, so that's why I said before we talk about how to use the DNF package manager or the YUM package manager, we need to. I've been thinking of how to combine this or how to integrate this topic to this and how to arrange the topics, so you can actually understand. So it's better we talk about how to install, how to configure YUM local repository on Red Hat 8 before we now talk about how to use the YUM or the DNF package manager. All right. So if your system is not subscribed, there's another way around it, and which is even what you're going to be doing in the examination. Or you're going to be configuring a YUM local repository. All right. So when we configure the YUM local repository, you can be able to install and download packages. All right. So let's look at how to configure YUM local repository. A local repository can be configured by using the Linux ISO or the DVD, all right? And the default Red Hat repository configuration file is in etc yum the repos.d, all right? If you do ls, you can see the Red Hat repo. So if you're also going to be configuring the yum local repository, you also need to create a configuration file in this directory in the etc yum.repos.d directory. All right. So this is another repository. This is the one I created, but I'll show you how to do that. So before I show you how to configure the yum local repository, let's understand what a repository file should contain. So let's see the one for Red Hat, right? So you can see everything in the file. So let's quickly explain what all these parameters mean. But we're just going to be I'm going to be explaining the important ones you need to configure your YUM local repository with. All right. The first parameter is very important. All right. So let's see what this is. It represents a unique repository ID. All right. So if you're configuring a YUM local repository, you need to give a repository ID, and it is unique. You can give any name you wish, but do not allow it to conflict with any already given repo ID on the system. All right. And when you're giving the name, also there shouldn't be any space. Like for example, this is a repo ID, so this is my repo, and you see that there is no any space at all. So this is how you give a repo ID. There is another important parameter which is name. Let's see where name is. So this is name. The name field is also very important, and that's the name of the repository you're configuring, right? You can also give any name you wish, but it's advisable you give any name you can easily relate with. And another important parameter you need is the base URL. The base URL is the repository's URL, that is where the packages are. All right. The ISO packages can or the packages can be located either locally on the system or on an HTTP, FTP, NFS server or whatsoever any kind of file server. All right. So, but for this topic in configuring the Yum local repository, ours is going to be local. All right, and this is the way you can um, configure or create a base URL value. All right, so you can either point it, if it is HTTP, this is how you're going to do it, and if it's HTTPS, this is how you're going to do it. If it is FTP server, this is how you're going to do it. But in our case, we're going to be using it's going to be local, so it's going to be a file server. This is how we're going to do it. Another important parameter is the enabled parameter, all right? So this value means that you either want to enable or disable the repository. And if the value is 1, it means that the repository will be enabled. But if it is 0, it means that the repository will be disabled. Of course, in this case, we want the repository to be enabled. And another important parameter is the GPG check parameter, and it is used to check the genuinity of the packages in the repository. So by default, GPG check is always 1, but in this case, we're the one configuring this. So of course, we know that the ISO package is genuine. So in this case, we're going to make it equal 0. All right. So just to avoid any complexities in the configuration. I'm going to be dropping the link to this website in the description section below. If you want to know more about the difference between RHEL 7 and RHEL 8 ISO, and also how you can, I mean, there are a lot of things you can learn here. You can always click and navigate your way through. All right. So now that we understand what a repository file should contain, let's go ahead and create a Yum local repository. The first thing you need to do is to get the ISO to your system. You can use FileZilla or any other FTP utility. So in my case, I'm using FileZilla. All right. So I'm just going to get the ISO into my system. I'm going to put it in slash media. You can put it anywhere you have space. All right. So I'm just going to drag it and put it here. I'm going to wait for the upload to complete. The transfer is complete, so I'm going to check my system. Oops. So I don't think it's in media. Let me check the FileZilla and see where the ISO was dropped again. So I think it's in root. Alright, so this is the ISO file. Apparently it was dropped in the root directory, home directory. So the next step to do is to mount the ISO to any mount point. Alright, so I can just mount this to slash mnt. The ISO image is mounted. Let's verify this so we can see that it's mounted, all right, on MNT. The next step is to make a directory so that you can copy the ISO files in that directory. You can copy the ISO files in any path you wish to copy it to, but I'm just going to make a directory called ISO files, right? So I'm going to copy everything in the mount directory. So I'll copy all of this to the ISO files directory. So I'm just going to do hyphen verbose and archive. All right. It's going to take a while because it's about 8.1 gig. The copy is complete, so let's check the ISO files. So you can see the ISO packages here in this file. Okay, so let's create the local repository file. All right. So I can call this ISO files or any name I wish to call it. This is different from the RHEL 7. In RHEL 8, you need to configure two base URLs, one for the app stream and one for the base OS, unlike the one we did when we configured the local repository for RHEL 7. Briefly, this you can use any name here, and this is the base URL. All right, and the base URL is file. We're pointing to the ISO files, and we're pointing to the upstream package file, and this is a GPG check, which is 0, right? And the name, you can give any name in here. So I'm just using Red Hat Ent Linux Upstream, and enable here is 1. So the same thing here as well. You can give any name here. The base URL, it needs to point to the ISO files because this was the directory we created where our packages are, right? And it also needs to point to the base OS. The GPG check, right? It can be 0. The name too can be any name you wish to give, and enable us to be 1. So I'm just going to save the file. So I'm going to test our configuration. You can use DNF repo list or yum repo list, whichever one works. You can see the repo ID here, and you can see the packages that we have. So the configuration is working. So this is how you configure your Yum local repository on Red Hat 8 system. You can install whatever package you want to install. So in this case, we're installing the HTTPD server. All right. So quick one, if you're going to be writing the RHCSA 8 exam or the LFCS exam or the SUSE Linux exam, you can scroll down to the end of this website and click on the exam practice questions. I'm going to be updating this website from time to time, and you can always come here to practice before you write the exam. All right. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe to this channel, and bye for now.